Welcome to Power of the Tribe podcast. I'm your host, John Connors, and today we have 5 tactics, 5 techniques, Dan, to take you from a wimp to a hero to help you when you go to compete. If somebody who's nervous about competing in jiu-jitsu, and
what about someone that's nervous at all?
Could do anything, a speech. Yeah. I was also considering the title, 5 tactics to go from a bitch to a boss. How's that sound? I think my son suggested that one.
Oh, so what's the original title?
I don't have one.
5
tactics. These are 5 tactics, I'll call them, that I get very nervous before competing. And it's not fun.
By the way, I will say no one would predict that about you. You seem very calm.
Well, I put a lot of work, and that's where I've come up with a lot of tactics and techniques. So.
You seem emotionally stunted.
Stunted or stable?
Oh.
I'm physically stunted and intellectually, but I think I'm relatively stable emotionally. But
you seem very calm. No one would think that you would be nervous.
Well, it's a subjective thing, right?
This has been a while, and this is not a new thing for this podcast episode. That it's it was important for you to be like, for you to say, I'm also nervous.
Dan,
like,
I get
because
so
everyone's like,
nervous.
John is like this rock, and he's so calm. You're nervous too, right?
Dan, back in April of 2000, more than 20 years ago, I competed we called it the Pan Ams back then. People referred to it now as the Pans. And it was in Kissimmee, Florida. Went down there as a blue belt to compete. We weighed in the day before, so I think I was there for maybe 2 days, and then we competed. I was miserable. I mean, I felt
I think
so
you
much
in
crippling
2000,
anxiety.
how studly you were probably back then. Like,
yeah.
Peak physical condition.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? Like,
I was like a better looking Tom Cruise. Yeah. Smarter and not in a cult. Yeah.
And just like, and everyone probably was like, this guy, muscle bound, quick, athletic. And it was just like,
I did well. I won my division. Yeah.
But no one would have guessed that you were like miserable the whole time with nerves.
So miserable. And I thought, this isn't worth it. I don't want to do this. I'm so miserable. But.
So this, real quick, this is what's important to me, because I think a lot of times when it comes to something like competing in jiu-jitsu or anything, you feel like, I'm so nervous and no one else here is. Like, you know, in a way, you don't outwardly think that, right. But you feel like everyone here is like a stud, ready to go. They seem so eager, and you're like, and I'm the one I'm the pussy.
Yeah.
So I got used to talking in front of people.
Mm-hmm.
So like, I've taught these college classes in front of 300, crowds of 300 people.
300. That's a lot. That's a big crowd. Yeah.
So 300 is pretty big. I actually sometimes have more, but the one that I had to do repeatedly was 300.
Right. Do you think there's some number where maybe it gets less nerve-wracking if there's like 5,000 because it's just like a sea of people?
You're like, it's just madness?
Yeah.
I don't know, because I've had to teach classes of like, for me, maybe there's some number, but for me, the bigger was the worst. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, if I had to teach 30, I could deal with it.
300, that's
100.
Big. Yeah.
I
think probably a very unique situation, right? If you think about the history of the human animal, they're probably, back before recent times, a human hardly ever stood in front of 300 people and spoke to them, right?
A chief or something would have to do it, right? Like who? Like
the tribes probably weren't even that big. Yeah. It's probably really rare.
So I used to walk just having to be like, I'm going to teach you about the parts of the brain for a psychology class, and I'd be walking like to an execution because you know what I mean? Like I was like
that nervous.
Yeah, I'd just be like, oh my God. But what you learn is like, one thing is you learn for situations like that, like competing, you're like, I just have to go and do it. Like, right. I have to one foot in front of the other.
Well, that's one thing. The actual doing of it cures it. If you can do it, you can kind of cure yourself of most of the anxiety involved in the situation.
So I got to a point where I just to end it, that I didn't care at all, and I'm still there. Like, I think it's almost permanent. Like, if I have to walk and get in front of 300 people, I'm like, it doesn't bother me anymore.
Well,
because just for that.
Like,
so then if I had to box in front of 300 people, I'd be much more nervous. But for me to go talk in front of a crowd,
Mm.
it never went away. I'm
Mm.
like, I'll do it. It's fine. You know, I'll
right.
like,
So you inoculated yourself for that circumstance.
Yeah, I'm inoculated. I'm like, I'll just walk in. I just don't care. I just don't.
Mm.
It's not that, and it's nothing that, no mental strategy or something. I just don't feel it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But, so if someone else saw me do it, they'd just be like, oh, look at this guy. He just walks up there. He doesn't care.
He's a natural.
But, I went through the misery. You know, I went through the.
So your technique was just power through it, and after you do it enough times, all that anxiety goes away. Which is a valid technique.
Right.
But it's hard technique as well, too.
That might be the hardest way to do it.
Yeah.
Right.
Very interesting.
Just get pounded on until you don't care about it anymore.
Right. Yeah. And that definitely works. I wonder if it always works. That's interesting.
Well, yeah, I thought about that too with people saying, I want to toughen up my kids, for example. And it's like,
right.
And it's like, yeah, but what do you mean? It's like, one way to toughen up your kids is like they have enough misery that misery doesn't bother them anymore. That's not what you want to do with your kids, right? Like you want strategies to toughen up your kids rather than just beat on them until they don't care about being beaten on.
Oh, right.
Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
So the parallel is I went through it. I'm fine talking in front of big crowds. I don't even get an adrenaline rush because I got beaten on. It was, I had enough misery until it didn't bother me anymore. So what I'm wondering about for competing is, do you have to just get beaten on and miserable?
I don't think so. I think there's shortcuts. So that's what we're offering people today.
Bingo.
Ways to get around that. So you don't have to have that Dan experience.
Unending misery until you're just like, misery doesn't bother me anymore.
We're still in this COVID thing. Today's January. What's today? The 8th, Dimitri? And
we should say Happy New Year's to our listeners.
Happy New Year's, everybody.
And we should say, not only is it New Year, now we're past the first 100 episodes.
This is 101.
And now we can let the real stuff out. Like now that we got past 100 episodes, the secrets, like for our listeners that made it through 100 episodes, get to hear the real
good stuff.
Yeah, the real stuff.
And they said we wouldn't make it, Dan. When I came in here, I told Dimitri we were going to do at least 100 episodes.
He laughed at us.
Yeah, he scoffed.
What the heck? Yeah, what's that, Dimitri? Why'd you laugh at us?
He was trying to motivate us with negative motivation.
Was that what it was?
It worked.
Yeah.
Yeah. I also heard a lot of criticism that we don't teach enough lethal stuff. And now
we don't
that
teach
we're past
enough
lethal
stuff.
Lethal.
You heard that?
Yes. now we're past 100.
It's a big call for the lethal stuff.
Yeah, the lethal stuff. I'm saying for the listeners that want to hear, like, we're there. Like,
right.
we're
going to unleash the Kraken, right?
Yeah. Now it's all, like, the first 100 episodes were like, here's the basics.
Yep.
Now we're at,
okay.
If you keep listening now,
right.
Now you get all the stuff.
This is where you're going to go clear.
The deep stuff.
If this is Scientology, you just give us $50,000 and we're going to. Exactly. You're going to go clear. You're going to have the real secrets.
Yeah,
exactly. Find out about the aliens.
Exactly. Congratulations for everyone making it to episode 100, because now it takes off.
And may I say, if you've skipped any episodes,
that was
you have to go back and watch them, please.
Actually,
particularly there's one. This one, I think it's episode 58, perhaps, and I discuss my competition 58. In Europe, where I won the Euros and ate a bunch of pasta. Not a lot of people watch that one on YouTube.
Big mistake.
Big mistake. Please go back and watch that one. We only have 74 views of that, Dimitri. We got to get up to 100.
That's a disgrace.
So some brave soul has to watch that 26 more times, or a few people watch it. Yeah.
I would go so far to say, if you missed, was episode 58, you think?
I think it is. Yeah, I'm guessing. I don't know if I can pull it up here, but yeah.
But you might not even quite understand what we're saying now.
Right, if you don't watch that one.
If you skipped it.
That's foundational, that one, that episode. Yeah.
It's like, I'm listening to you.
Yeah.
Listeners now are like, I hear you, but I don't get what you're saying. It's because you didn't hear number 58.
Yeah. How I ate carbonara and I was 5 pounds overweight the night before.
Don't give it away, John.
Yeah. Well,
don't spoil it. Don't spoil it.
Well, let's get back.
Can we turn?
I try to get that. Just ignore that, Dad. There we go. So, you know what I was thinking about even today, about competition, how I'm so glad I compete. Oh, there's no tournaments now, Dan, because of COVID. And
what's this COVID
that we speak of?
That you're talking
and
about?
it's kind of a bummer, but I think they're going to start opening up soon. IBJJF has not announced the 2021 schedule yet, but I realize now, Dan, now that they don't have any tournaments scheduled, I really want to compete now. It's like, wow, you take away something and you realize it adds so much excitement to your life. And I really have come to the point now where I think every jiu-jitsu student should compete. And I know it's so much harder for some people than others. Like you mentioned before, like, oh, they thought you were natural. Some people are naturals, right? Where they just go and they fight in the cage, or they go do jiu-jitsu tournaments and they don't feel any nerves.
If you don't mind my saying, I think there's two types of naturals.
Yeah.
One are no nerves.
Yeah.
I don't want to say animals, but like
they just can go do it.
Well, there's even that. There's two types. There's animals who are like, I'm just aggressive. I'm going to go. I don't even care if I win or lose.
Okay.
There's easygoing people that also go and compete, and they don't care if they win or lose. And then I'd say, then there's someone like you who's like, I do get nervous, but you're good at it.
Right.
I think we should also address the people out there listening that are like, I'm nervous and I'm not that good.
Oh, right.
I might lose. I think what needs to be established more.
That's like a 4-quadrant system.
For people that are in gyms that are like, I'm nervous and I'm not that good, and be like, just go and compete. No one, you know what I mean? Like, it has to be like,
here's what
people that think they might lose, be like, it's okay. It's okay.
Right.
Just go compete. You might lose.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Here's the other thing that occurred to me. It's sort of obvious when I say it, is that, the people who aren't nervous, they go compete. They just have a great experience. The other thing about competing is it just sharpens your training, because you get excited. Oh, in 4 weeks, I'm getting ready for this tournament. I want to really hone this one takedown maybe or something. So you develop better because it's fixed to a certain date. You know what I mean? There's a sense of urgency, so you're going to get better. And then, but for the people who are nervous, if they can somehow find a way to get in there and compete, that's a life changer for them, right? So imagine if
it's more important,
because it's a huge upside. If they can get their head around it and pull it off, it could literally change the rest of their life. Like these guys who are like, they're numb to it. Yeah, I just go, I compete, I do my thing. That's not going to change the rest of their life that much. But if somebody's like this very conscientious person and they're a little nervous and it's hard for them, if they can find some of these tactics and techniques and the wherewithal to go do it, that could change their life. And now when they go and speak in front of a group someplace or take a chance
trying to kill me.
Yeah, nobody's going to. I go in this job interview, no one's going to strangle me. Yeah. Could change your life.
Can I give an example? Like my son, my son, Matt.
Yeah.
Like he was a gentle kid, sweet kid, quiet kid, smart kid. Yeah. But he was not an aggressive kid.
Right.
And I put him on the wrestling team.
Mm-hmm.
And he went to these meets. He went to many, many meets.
Yeah.
Where I guess
you probably do like 15 matches a season, maybe, or something like that, and then tournaments as well.
Yeah. Most of the listeners know what wrestling is, but some don't. Like, you have to compete and picture like a 14-year-old kid or 13-year-old kid, and you have to go in front of your peers, and everyone's looking at you, and you have to butt heads and
you're out there all by yourself against somebody
fighting.
else.
Like viciously fighting,
and everybody's watching.
And it was not his nature. Do you know what I mean? Like, it was not. There's a lot of kids that are little animals, and you're like, this
he's
is
in the middle of the match. All of a sudden, he looks at the guy and goes, "Hey, can't we just get along?"
Yeah, he didn't. There's certain kids.
Well, your son trained a little jiu-jitsu with us, and he was very good actually, because he was smart, so he could grasp all the technique. So I'm sure as a wrestler, he was pretty effective as well.
But he just had no aggression.
Right.
He didn't want to be there.
Yeah, that's a tough call.
And I understood that he didn't want to be there.
Yeah.
But I was like, this will benefit you. And it sounds like I'm really resistant to making silly claims. So I'm making this claim logically.
Okay.
That I really truly believe he went through that I'm not sure he even knew that I knew he didn't want to be there. I understood he didn't want to be wrestling in front of everyone. But I think then you have a shy kid that goes to college and it's like, I'll ask out this girl or I will try out for this
I think so.
singing group or whatever else it is, like totally away from jiu-jitsu or wrestling. And it's like, I faced the fire. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I got in front of everyone with everyone looking at me, and win or lose is not even the thing. You know what I mean?
I agree.
And it's like, I faced the fire. I can now do these easier tasks.
I agree.
You know, I really think that for growing up, and I think even for adults or people listening, I think it's the same thing. It's like, can you get out there and do this extremely unpleasant thing? So some people will love competing, but I think we're also talking to people that are like, I don't care what you say. I'm not competing. It's awful.
Right.
It's like, we get that. I get it.
I get it.
I get it.
And I'm proposing that those people have the most to gain if they can actually pull it off.
Because the only reason I bring it up, last point, is that I get not wanting to do it.
Yeah.
And then you also get not wanting to do it. But then people listening might be like, yeah, but John's the world champ. So, you know, you didn't want to do it, but you got that you might win and that you're good. What I'm trying to appeal to is the people that are like, well, maybe I'm not that good also.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, but it's like, yeah, but you could still face it, you know?
And then you could still have some positive outcome. Maybe you win one match and you thought you couldn't do anything. See, what happens, Dan, is, you know, there's a lot of techniques that are kind of new agey where people can pump themselves up and they do mantras and they have goals and they have vision boards and, you know, it's like the secret and they're going to make themselves different. But if for a lot of us to change our self-image, like for me, I suspect you're the same type of person. You can't just talk yourself into a superior self-image. But when you go and you face the dragons and you do the thing, that changes your self-image. And there's nothing as effective as that. So the last competition I went, I was also very nervous before it. And then when it was done, I could just feel my nervous system had changed. I'm like, oh, I can compete with I went against the big guys, the ultra heavyweights. I'm like, oh, I can compete with these guys. And I thought I could before, but I wasn't sure. And I could have like convinced myself through mantras or whatever. And it's just not the same. Then once you go do it, you're like, oh, I can do this. You know what I mean?
Do you also think there's people out there too that, again, less ability than you?
Yeah.
That could just be like, even if you lose, you could be like, I did all right. Like, you know
Definitely,
what I mean? Like, I got out there like,
definitely.
I did okay. I lost, but
yep,
I was okay.
Completely. Like, oh, I didn't get destroyed. I'm still in one piece. Huh. Yeah. I lost, but the world's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's definitely effective. And to go off on a slightly different point, if you compete, you will get better. It's such a forcing function. That's the only real guarantee in jiu-jitsu is if you compete enough, you will have to get better. You know, we got a great student, Dana Sharpton. He's going to get his blue belt next week. And he just jumped in as a white belt and he competed and he ended up winning 18 matches over, you know, 18
He won
months.
18 matches?
He won 18 matches. Like he lost a few, I think, but he won 18 matches, right?
That's a lot of matches to win.
Well, now they have Grappling Industries, which is a great tournament, and they have round robin, so you can go and get a bunch of matches in one day. Like my son has
I feel like I'm not positive I won 18 matches my entire...
Right. But that was my point. I thought, you know, when somebody gets a belt, it's a very subjective thing. Like this guy, we're going to give him his blue belt. How do we know he's a blue belt? Like you could have a test where they do certain things, but it's still very subjective because, you know, we're trying to come up with an idea of how effective somebody is. And it's a little bit of a moving target, and it's just hard, right? You can imagine that. Like, what is a blue belt? What isn't a blue belt? Like, if somebody's beating all the blue belts in the gym, then all right, they're definitely a blue belt. But it's not always that easy. But I was thinking, if somebody just went and they won 15 white belt matches, bam, they're a blue belt, right? That'd be easy. And then it's completely objective. And the beauty of that is that would be all in their control. Well, not entirely in their control, but if a student is waiting for me to give them a blue belt, they're a little disempowered in a way, right? They're waiting for it to be granted to them. But if we just had an objective standard, just go win 15 white belt matches. And I go, yeah, I just won. There's your blue belt. Yeah. Like, it's objective as it can get, right? Yeah. Do you ever hear of what's his name? Half Gracie in his school, how they used to do promotions? So I heard this story, Dan. I can't testify that it's true, but I'll put it out there. And it's not a negative story. So the way I understand how he used to do it is every Sunday he would have an in-house tournament. So everybody, let's say who was a 4-stripe white belt, they would show up and they would have a tournament. And I think it was open weight. And to get your blue belt, you had to win that tournament 4 Sundays in a row. Like, if you won it 3 Sundays in a row and then you went on your honeymoon the 4th Sunday, you got to start all over again, man. And talk about a forcing function. Talk about like a winnowing system. Like, whoever could do that, you're pretty confident they're a blue belt. Yeah. They beat all these other guys 4 weeks in a row, right?
It's a definite. So if they win it, they definitely deserve it.
Yeah.
The problem is with that, of course, there are people who'll never be able to do it.
That's a problem.
Yeah.
That's a potential problem. Yeah. But it's so it shouldn't be your only system. You know what I mean? But if we had that in my academy, go win 15 white belt matches, exactly. And then
some people just prove it objectively. Yeah. And those of you who can't do it, we're looking at you too.
Yep.
That's what
Yeah, but that's the beauty of competing. And the beauty of competing too, Dan, is it keeps you from going down this crazy path of like nutty martial arts where it doesn't work. I saw this weird video of that guy. What's his name? Fred Villari. Remember him? In our first location, Dimitri, in Dedham, he used to be in there years before. So when we started training hard and the window steamed up, you could read the sign on the window. It said Fred Villari Studio Self-Defense. I was like,
from where?
In Dedham.
Well, my this is from episode 3 of this podcast.
Yeah.
My initial martial arts training was Villari's.
Was it?
Karate.
Wow. You never said that. You were too kind.
I don't think I said Villari.
Put his name out there.
I will tell you one thing. So the guy who taught me was a great guy and is a great guy. And the school is great with kids, and they teach them all. I have nothing bad to say about that. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't like.
I just brought it up because I recently saw a video.
Do you know what I mean? Like, so that said, all I'm saying is that I also had those stories. Like Villari himself set himself up as this.
It's a guru. Yeah.
Guru.
Yeah.
And so going back 100 episodes, they tell stories about Fred Villari.
Yeah.
And like these.
Is he the guy that fell testicle?
Yeah.
And he pulled his foot back?
So again, I'm sure everyone listening has heard all 100 episodes. But the story was about Fred Villari that it was told in awe that he kicked at someone's groin and someone was like, "Oh, you almost hit me." And he was like, and Fred Villari just calmly said, "I stopped when I felt testicle."
That's awesome.
Like he had these.
Yeah.
So that's what Fred Villari was teaching us.
But my point is, if you're not competing in a sport, you can go down that road relatively quickly. Right. That's the beauty of a sport. Like, for some reason, combat sports get such a sort of a criticism from these nutty real life self-defense people, and I think
that's flipping though, right? I mean, I feel like starting in 1993, it started changing.
Yeah. And if you had two people that are going to fight, Dan, and they were the same size, same height and weight, same athletic ability, and you said, "Oh, this one guy is an experienced boxer, and he's had whatever you tell me 20 amateur boxing matches, and the other guy's had none of that." I'm going to bet on the boxer.
Yeah.
I'm not going to win every time, but I'm probably going to win 95% of the time. I don't know. It's just so silly. So that's the beauty of sports, is that it keeps you in reality.
But again, how about a guy who's had 10 boxing matches and a guy that has extensively spent equal amount of time hitting a heavy bag?
Yeah,
like,
exactly. Yeah.
It's just sort of who competed, who did it.
Definitely. All right. So
we're at we've made it to point 0.
And believe it or not, I have a lot more stuff before we get to the first point. I wanted to talk about, have you seen this video that the great John Danaher put out? It's called The Parable of the Plank.
No.
It's a good alliteration. And, I'm a big
Danaher
fan. So I mean no disrespect to him at all, because
of course not. You're always
I buy all his instructionals. I love him. He's a genius. But he has this idea, and I thought it's a great story, and I listened to it, but I've been thinking about it for a long time, and I think I have something to add to it, so I'm not criticizing him. So he says, if you take a plank, a piece of wood that's 12 inches wide, and if you put it, and maybe it's 12 feet long, you put it on your living room floor, you can walk back and forth across that plank with ease, right? Completely easily. Now you put it up 10 stories high over a chasm that's up 10 stories, and you can't make it across because you're petrified.
Right.
So somehow this story illustrates the effect of stress and the stress response on performance, on physical performance. Like suddenly you can't even walk.
Right.
And, I think that's a point that kind of makes sense. But the more I started thinking about it, well, I should be terrified, because if I make one mistake 10 stories up, I'm going to die.
Right.
So it's perfectly reasonable to have a major stress response. And if it's on my living room floor, Dan, how many times can I walk back and forth across that thing before I accidentally slip off? What do you think? 1,000 times? 10,000 times? There's some number where
you slip off.
I slip off. Yeah. My ankle twitches or something happens. Somebody makes a noise and I turn and I slip off the thing. So let's say it's 1 in 10,000 times I step off that plank. Yeah, I don't want that risk of my death. I don't want a 1 in 10,000 risk that I'm going to die maybe. So, yeah, if that was up 10 stories high, that plank, I'd probably get on if I had to cross it, if that building's burning.
You're going to crawl, yeah.
I'm going to crawl. I'll probably get on my belly and crawl, right? I'm going to make sure the thing's stable first. I mean, there's a lot to
now, the way I'm doing it now is 1 in 500,000 times.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a problem with these hypothetical examples anyways, because it's like, well, how stable is the board? Do I really have to cross it? What the hell is going on?
I hear you. You're saying you
it's like
agree
the famous trolley car experiment, which I'm sure you're well versed with. I hate that too, because it's like, oh, are you going to flip the lever to save these two people, but it'll kill somebody else? I'm like, well, how do I know it's going to kill them? What if I don't flip any levers?
What are the other details?
What if I just go, hey, get off the tracks, and they get off the tracks?
What are the other details?
Yeah. Like, what certainty do I have of any outcome? I have very little, you know what I mean? There's probabilities involved that make it super complicated, right? So, not to get too far from my point here, but my point was, when people go to compete in jiu-jitsu, by and large, they're not afraid of falling to their death. Like, so we're not afraid of dying. I don't think in jiu-jitsu we're really probably afraid of getting injured that much. Maybe a little bit.
No one's scared of that.
MMA, they might be afraid of getting.
You always said there's this undefined.
But here's the question, Dan. Sorry. What are people afraid of?
That's what it
I have the answer.
That's what I start. Oh, you do?
Oh, yeah.
Let me say first.
Yeah.
That I was like, there's an undefined fear.
Yep.
Of like, you're like, what? Like, any one of us could get in a cage, and you're like, maybe some people are like, I'm so scared of my nose getting broke. I'm so scared of pain. I'm not scared of that at all. And really, most people are not. But there's something very scary, and it seems to involve embarrassment, and it seems to involve loss of status.
That's it.
And I'm going to guess that's what you're.
Yeah, you nailed it. It's 100% loss of status.
It's like my friends all thought I was going to do better, and I didn't. Right? Like
now they think less of me than they did before. So why is that painful? Because your selfish gene, it's an unconscious fear. Your selfish gene calculates, oh, my odds of surviving and reproducing just went down 2%, and that's painful. That's literally what's happening. And the reality is, you're losing in a jiu-jitsu match or whatever, your likelihood of surviving and replicating doesn't go down at all.
Yeah.
But your DNA doesn't know that. That's what's giving you this pain. And then there's also like this, it's connected where this fear of the unknown, where you're like, I don't know what could happen. And that unknown is like a magnifier. So you're like, yeah, I don't want to look bad. Plus I have this other kind of dark fear of, I don't know what could happen. And it magnifies that other fear. And that's 100% what it's about, is losing status or esteem from your friends or other people, or quote unquote embarrassing. I think I like to say losing status because that really kind of makes it, what do I want to say? It's like scientific. It's very laboratory-esque. You know, when you say embarrassed, that's like a hormone. That's like like a emotion. It's just,
people feel like I'm not embarrassed.
Yeah. It's emotional, so it's squishier, it's fuzzier. But if you really want to lay it out, it's losing status. That's the fear, and it's an unconscious fear. It's not even a conscious fear. So that's the fear we have. We're not afraid of fault or death. We're afraid. Our genes are afraid that we're going to lose status, and that's what causes us all this stress and anxiety. So if we can somehow address that fear of losing status, all this anxiety will go away. Here's the word I was searching for. A clinical way to say it is we have an unconscious fear of losing status. We're not even conscious of it, but that's it. So if we can address that loss of status, it can make everything easier. So now some techniques to help our listeners here.
So the whole episode has been about how do you deal with this sort of fear of losing status / competing /
being nervous,
and just we are at point 0.
We're at point 0. We're about to hit point 1, though. Okay, so we had to lay the groundwork for it. We had to describe what's going on. I think it is very important, actually, to know what actually is happening. Like, what am I really afraid of? What's happening here? So the first technique I want to talk about, I might have brought it up in previous episodes. It's called the Homer MacDonald technique. So Homer MacDonald.
Your fear of going to McDonald's.
Fear of reading Greek literature in McDonald's. No, it's Homer MacDonald was a therapist of some type. I heard about this technique years ago. So he may be dead by now. He probably is. I think he was an old guy at that time, but he was a therapist. And
he's listening now going, thanks.
Yeah.
Sometimes this happens. Quick aside, where we talk about different
celebrities
or books we've read or other jiu-jitsu, and then they reply to us. Maybe the listeners don't realize this happens.
Doris Day, dead or alive?
A lot. Dead?
Dead. Yeah, she died last year, sadly.
Say just today, Tommy Lasorda.
Oh, I know. I saw that.
2 shocking news.
93?
Shocking news 1, Tommy Lasorda died.
Yeah.
Shocking news 2, Tommy Lasorda was alive until yesterday.
Shocking news 3, Doris Day is still dead. Yeah.
So what's happened to us a number of times, though, honestly, right, is that we're just discussing these things, and then the person we're discussing contacts you.
They somehow
and we're
listen
like,
to this.
And we're like, wow.
It's always impressive, yeah.
So
I'll only say good things about it.
So, Homer MacDonald, you may be alive.
You may be alive. If you're alive, thank you.
We're happy that you're
inspiration alive. So I modified his technique, but here's his technique. Very smart guy. So he had somehow developed a claustrophobia very late in life. I think he said he was visiting some country in maybe Central America, and he got on some little bus or van, and he was in the back, and they had a bad exhaust system, and he got trapped, and he had a moan of panic, and he couldn't get out of the bus in time, and he developed this real sort of claustrophobia. Now, he had his anniversary coming up with his wife, maybe his 50th anniversary or more, and he planned a trip to Europe.
This is an old dude.
Old dude, yep. And the trip was like 6 months away. So this is interesting. So every time he started thinking about the trip, he would start to get really anxious, almost panicked. And I've noticed this myself, Dan. So it's one thing if you can just show up to an event and feel anxiety right before the event and do it. Like, that's kind of lousy, right? But for most of us, we have an event that's like 8 weeks out or something, and every day we wake up and we think about it, and we have an experience of anxiety. So you're getting that like 60 days in a row maybe before you have the experience,
Right.
which is awful. You're just
And
magnifying
pointless.
the misery.
And helps you not at all.
Dan,
there's
it
no
helps
helpful-
you not at all.
Yeah, there's no helpful aspect to it.
And here's my unscientific theory. I think it actually makes it much worse because I suspect you're creating a stronger negative association with the event every time you think about it and you experience anxiety. I imagine on a neurological level, you're putting myelin sheathing around the synapse that's connecting the idea of that event with your anxiety, right? You're probably like actually burning it into your system even stronger every time you think about it and have this nervous reaction. Does that sound reasonable?
Yeah.
That makes sense, right? So,
Well, I think everyone knows this by now. How the brain works is every time you shoot something down whatever pathway in the brain, it strengthens that connection.
Yeah.
So if you
I think
think
it's
about
that
it again and
myelin
again-
sheathing goes around it, strengthens it,
So for
insulates it.
right.
That's what it insulates
So
it.
for
yeah.
example, there's a theory now, like if you have a traumatic event,
Uh-huh.
like a car crash and someone died
Okay.
or something awful, there's an actual thing now of like quickly actually sedate that person to stop the brain from hammering the event
Oh,
again and
that's
again and again
fascinating.
into their head.
That's fascinating.
Because, do you know what I mean? Like it seems like a
I've
weird
never heard of
thing
that.
to do,
That
but
kind of makes sense, though.
doesn't it make sense? Like
So they don't
'cause
have
they'll
PTSD.
replay it, replay it,
Yeah.
replay it, replay it. It's like stop that as
That
soon as you
replay.
can.
Yeah.
Stop the replay. And I think for all of us, day in, day out, and I understand this, and I'm not perfect at it. It's always one thing to understand it versus doing it,
Yeah.
which is I'm terrible at replaying events, right?
Yeah.
If something negative, literally someone cuts you off in traffic and yells F you, and I can 40 times later that day replay my anger at that. Like,
Dan, I didn't know
I-
that was you. I thought it
wish
was somebody else.
yeah, well, yeah. Well, I replayed it 40 times, John. So, but like the idea is that
Yeah.
replaying it hammers it into
Yeah.
your brain. Stop it.
Yeah. So
Is
if
the
you're
idea.
dreading this tournament that you can do or this speech you have to give 2 months from now, and every day you're replaying it and you're having this anxiety, that's not good. You know what I mean? That's the opposite.
Yeah.
That's awful. So you're
don't-
suffering, and you're probably going to make yourself even more nervous when you're finally at the event, right?
Because it's hammered into your brain.
Yeah.
I also do it with sorrowful events, right? Like something like, something sad. Your dog dies.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And I
grieve.
replay it.
Yeah.
You sit at night and think of it.
Yeah.
Like the point is, I think there's value in stopping yourself from doing it. Like, do
Definitely.
not keep replaying it.
Yeah.
Like,
I
because
think
you're
there's some
burning it into your brain.
Yeah. There's some value in a grieving replay. I think that's an evolutionary. There's probably a survival benefit there where you can correct some sort of fatal mistake
Right.
you're making.
Right.
But you can do that pretty quickly. You don't have to do that every day for a year. You know what I
Right.
mean? You
I
do
think
it
where you're
twice.
getting at, there's a reason you do it.
Yeah.
Is
Definitely.
to say why did that happen?
Yeah.
And then, but sometimes, like if your dog died or any of these examples we've
Yeah.
given, there's nothing you can correct.
Nothing.
Or if there's an upcoming,
Or something small.
event.
If
Yeah,
there is
yeah.
something, then you got it.
yeah,
You know, you're going to figure it out pretty quickly. You don't need to keep making yourself miserable, right?
yeah. And we might have said this on this podcast before. Picture saying it out loud, and you realize that approaches insanity. Like, you know what I mean? Like something embarrassing happens.
Oh, right.
You replay it, and you replay it, you replay it, and it's like, what if each time you said it out loud, you'd seem like a crazy person? Like you'd be like, and
Yeah.
I'm saying it again,
Yeah.
and I'm saying it again,
Right.
and I'm saying it again.
Not even the content of it,
yeah.
just the fact that you keep doing it, right?
Or even just
Yeah.
like, say you break up with someone and you replay it. I should have said this. I should have said that. But just
You do it out
the idea
loud.
is, picture if you did it out loud. It would just be like, what is wrong with you? You're saying it again and you're
Yeah.
saying it again and you're saying it again. Like, calm down.
Calm
Like,
down.
And that's, I think, one of the
Oh,
point you're
so-
getting at, right? Like, don't
So here's the
keep
technique
doing
that Homer MacDonald came up with. So he was a very smart guy, very good therapist, I imagine. So what he came
it.
up
Possibly
with is
alive still.
possibly alive, possibly not decomposing as we speak. So he came up with this idea of
Homer MacDonald not being a name that sounds like a great philosopher.
it does. Well, yeah.
Homer, yes. MacDonald, no.
I think he was also from the South.
There's
so
a
he
Homer
had a little
Simpson,
bit of a
Homer
twang.
Simpson, and a Ronald McDonald, both built in.
Yeah, you got a couple cartoonish characters there. But anyway, at any rate,
I feel like I'm interrupting the deep point here.
Yeah, so his technique was when he would think about his plane trip for his wife's anniversary, he would get hit with anxiety. So what he started to do is he started to say to himself in his mind, he might have even done it out loud then, now that you talk about saying things out loud, he would say, I can do that. I can do that. So he'd think about flying in the plane, and he would say, I can do that. And what he realized is it was very important that he put this kind of lilting, cheery emotion into what he was saying. I can do that. I can do that. So every day or every moment he thought about the plane ride, he would, I can do that. I can do that, until he felt like he had squashed the nervous reaction. And then by the time, a couple of months later, he had to take the trip, he was fine taking the trip. And then I've used this technique myself, not only in competing, but I used to not like flying either. And I found it very helpful. I modified it a little bit because I thought that this idea of I can do that meant that you're overcoming something. And a lot of these things that we're having anxiety about, you're not even overcoming them. You're just like riding on a plane. The other idea I used to think about plane ride, I'm like, literally a potted plant can fly in a plane. Am I not as courageous as a potted plant? Like, why the hell am I getting nervous? You know what I mean?
No, so you're not, but a potted plant is pretty courageous. Potted plant will sit there.
So anyway, what I came up with is I changed it from I can do that to I love to do that. Mm-hmm. So that was like you're looking forward to it. So I made it even more positive, and I felt it was an even more powerful mantra. So whenever I think of something that's like, oh, I got to go do this thing, it's causing me anxiety, I love to do that. I love to do that. And then for me, flying in the plane, the worst part is the taking off. That was the worst part for me. And then I would start telling myself, not only do I love to fly, I love taking off. That's my favorite thing to do in the world, is taking off from a plane. And it was a complete lie. But oddly enough, my nervous system believed that dumb lie. And I felt way better. Yeah.
Right. What I like about it is, like, I get there's people out there going, yeah, but I would never really believe it. It's like, you too, right? You never really believed it, but it just helped.
Totally helps.
We talked about it with jiu-jitsu, right? Of saying, like, I can pass any guard. I'm the best guard passer in the world. I understand people hearing that technique would be like, no, I know I'm not the best guard passer in the world. It's like, that's not what you're saying, right? It's like,
I'm not saying that.
There's a middle ground where you're like, I know some part of your brain understands that you're not the best guard passer in the world, or that you're still nervous, but like you're mitigating the anxiety. You're helping.
The anxiety that I'm having, whether it's for flying or competing in a tournament, that's not rational either. That's something that's coming up from the unconscious. So when I'm addressing it with something that's not rational, you're kind of on even footing. You know what I mean? Like, for the most part, you fly in an airplane, there's very little chance of anything bad happening to you. So when you have that type of panic and fear where you're going to pass out,
it's rounded out. There's a 0% chance.
Yeah. So that's completely irrational as well. So I think dealing with it with an irrational mantra is very effective. You know,
and applying to these tournaments, right? Like, there's basically 0% chance of anything negative happening to you.
Damn, zero. That's the other thing. It's safer than skiing. It's probably safer than riding a bike. Very safe activity. You get two people. There's not a lot of things moving around.
And again, like you said, no one's really scared of getting hurt. They're scared of some sort of harm,
loss of status.
They
have a vague fear.
But I think it's not going to happen, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like, really, you losing is what's going to happen?
Here's the other thing. If you go out, you were talking about have a white belt go win 15 white belt matches. If somebody goes out and they have 15 matches, even in their whole life, nobody can remember. Dan, if you went out and had 15 matches and somebody said, what was Dan's record? I'd be like, I don't know.
Well, he lost a bunch. He
won some and he lost. I don't know. You expected me to remember that? So that's the other thing. If you go out and really dedicate yourself to competing, then each match just statistically has less of an effect on your esteem, to the point where it has absolutely zero effect on any status you have really with anybody, you know. But that's very rational too. So, but the other beauty of this technique, Dan, is if you're really dreading something, you might on a daily basis have that experience of dread and worry and anxiety. So if you can just mitigate that every day, that's going to make your life so much better, right?
Right. This is a great example of something that extends beyond jiu-jitsu.
Yeah,
to
for sure.
everybody, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Which we always claim
we make
applies
that
to
claim.
most of the things we talk about.
I think they do. Yeah.
Well, really,
This
though, like,
really does. This stuff does.
But also, we're never on here. You're never on here saying, "I'd like to twist my wrist a quarter of an inch during this choke."
You don't get
like. And there's great tutorials of people that do that.
Definitely.
That's sort of not what we do.
Not what we're doing right now. Okay, technique number 2. This one I invented completely myself. Homer MacDonald, Ronald McDonald. Nobody had any
John
impact on
McConnors.
this. Nobody. This is the John McConnors technique. I call it the Hollywood producer technique, Dan. I see you looking at my notes here. Yeah. So when I first started, I think I really felt it when I was coaching and I brought a team to compete, maybe in a Naga many, many years ago, like in 2005. Maybe when I first took a guy to an MMA fight for the first time. And you know how I felt then? I felt like, what the hell am I doing here? I don't belong here. Who am I to think I can coach somebody to compete in this event? I literally felt like I didn't belong there. I think we've all felt that, right? Yeah.
Very common. And you're saying you felt that more than once, right? Like your first event and then maybe like a big UFC event or whatever.
Right. Yeah,
like at different levels. You're like, should I be here?
Yeah. I don't belong here. Yeah. I'm sure I felt that in a lot of times in my life in different.
It's related to what I'm sure you've heard, the imposter syndrome, right?
Yeah.
Like every new job, everyone listening gets to, and they're like, you sit at your desk and you're like, what am I?
Can't believe they hired me.
I have no idea what I'm supposed to do. So we've all been there.
We've all been there.
Or most of us have been there.
So the technique I came up with, Dan, is I started to use my imagination, that I was a Hollywood producer and that I owned everything and I was an entrepreneur. So I owned the whole grappling tournament. I owned Naga, and everyone that worked there was my employee. And they were all basically actors, and everyone competing there was an actor. And everyone
for your purpose,
for my experience and my benefit. It was like a simulation where I was the only active character. Everyone else was an NPC, non-playing character. And I had designed them all, and they were all here to serve me and give me an experience.
Which possibly is true if all of reality is a simulation. Just as an aside. But that's sort of a deeper...
I could be sitting at home right now with the virtual reality set on my eyes, and this is all a bunch of baloney. Yeah,
exactly.
But that's what I would do. And Dan, it worked like a charm. I felt so much better. I felt like I belonged. I felt friendly to everyone, open to everyone, and my baseline,
video game characters.
Yeah, my baseline assumption was they were here to help me have an experience, and it might be they might be here to beat my athletes or something, but there was no malice. There was nothing.
It's your game.
Yeah, there was no evil about to happen to me, and I totally belonged. Nobody was going to kick me out of there. It was my game. There was a movie, I think it was called The Game, where it's like these. It was Sean Penn, I think, was in it, and Michael Douglas, and they're two rich brothers. And for his birthday gift, he gives them this adventure where he hires all these actors, and they like clock him over the head, and they ship him to Mexico. Do you remember the movie? It must have been in the 90s.
I saw it, but it's very fake.
And then like somebody jumps off a building, and then at the reveal, this is spoiler alert, his brother set it all up, and he spent millions of dollars to create this.
Apologies to everyone out there. It was like, I was just about to watch The Game with Michael Douglas.
Michael Douglas and Sean Penn from 1992 or something.
Sorry.
Yeah. But it's kind of like that. So I call it the Hollywood producer.
That's actually a great tactic. And again, not jiu-jitsu specific at all, right?
You can use that for anything. Yeah. It's a great way to look at life. Like, people are here to help me, right?
Yeah.
Like, you could go around looking at life like people are here to screw me, or they're here to help me. And if you probably go around thinking, for the most part, as long as you're not in a bad part of town at 2 a.m., but for the most part, if you have that attitude that people are here to help me, probably things go better for you, right?
It relaxes you.
Yeah. But you probably elicit even more
Right.
help from people.
Right.
Like just things actually go better for
Everyone
you.
treats you better.
Yeah,
Right.
because they're not on the defensive or anything.
Right.
Yeah. So that's number 2. That's a solid one. Okay. Number 3, I'm not as jazzed about, Dan. It's not as solid.
You're critical of your own point.
I'm critical, but I've actually used this one. I used this one the last 2 tournaments actually, and I got it. I started using it when I was training with the great Mark DellaGrotte at Sityodtong, and we talked and we had a special episode about this big cat energy and how the more cat-like you can be, you can relax your body, and your body can perform well and can be more athletic. You manage your energy better. Like sometimes I can have that pit bull energy, Dan, where I just tighten my muscles up and I grab somebody and I just want to throttle them and use my strength. And you really can't perform at your best with that energy, you know? So what I started doing before competing in the tournament, I go out there and you're kind of waiting at the desk and you're about to step on the mat, but they're finishing a match up. So usually I start pacing back and forth. And people do that. They pace and they might do jumping jacks. So I started pacing, but with like a cat-like walk. So my Jaguar pacing. So I would imagine that I'm actually a black Jaguar from South America, and I'm just cat pacing around. And my shoulders are moving, my body's loose. And man, I felt a lot better doing that.
Right.
I don't
As
know.
opposed to I think you said before, well, this is a little different. That's the pacing. I think the way you brought it up before was if a Jaguar's looking at, a rabbit or something in the, I don't know, whatever you want to put in those, and they're both still.
Oh, right.
They're both perfectly still, but there's 2 energies, right?
Yeah.
Like one is like, oh shit. And one is like, I'm waiting, right?
Yeah, the Jaguar's pretty much the alpha predator. Like nobody's eating him.
Yeah, like
I'm either going to eat you or you're going to get away.
And
so.
even if they're both still, there's a different energy.
Yeah, exactly.
And then you're saying moving.
Yeah, you're managing your energy better. Yeah.
Right.
And
If a sachet is the right.
sachet. Yeah, it's very feline.
The catwalk.
The catwalk. Yeah, the cat strut. And
I
I think
I don't think catwalk.
I
is
think
the one we're looking for.
at the very minimum you're distracting yourself so you're not getting all overly
I
nervous.
don't think the model catwalk is what you're getting at.
No,
here. I think
no.
walking more like a feline.
Yeah, wasn't there? We're doing a great show about throwbacks. I think it was the late 70s, maybe early 80s. Cat People, Natasha Kinski.
Yes.
That's a good movie. That's something worth people going back and seeing. Weird as hell, but pretty good, right?
Yeah, I'm not sure if you want Natasha Kinski energy.
I get total Natasha Kinski energy. That's what I should call it, Natasha Kinski energy. Yeah.
she had anything past that, but
she was great at that.
She was hot in that.
She was hot. She was perfect for that role. She was totally a Catwoman and perfect.
She's like,
yeah. Go watch that one. I would watch that one before the game and then watch the game. So those are our first 3. But that really works.
Cat energy.
Cat like slinking around.
Big cat energy.
Move my shoulders
as opposed
and hips.
to big dick energy, which is another thing.
No, that's good too. But as opposed to big dog energy, I think big cat energy is good. Yeah.
All these things.
Okay. Now my 4th tactic or technique, I call it the hero's journey. So I'm a big Joseph Campbell fan, and if people out there, you want to read some of his stuff, it's great. You can see him on YouTube. He was interviewed by a guy from PBS. I forget his name right now, but some great interviews. Super smart guy. But so he describes the hero's journey, which is sort of a story arc that goes through a lot of cultures and a lot of stories of heroes. And ultimately what the hero does, he gets called to adventure. He initially refuses the call. Then he goes on the call. Then he gets an advisor, blah, blah, blah. He goes to another dimension, another realm. And in that other realm, he has an adventure, and he gains new knowledge, and then he comes back to his tribe, and he shares this new knowledge with his tribe. So that's the hero's journey. So it's very cool. So I started thinking about competing. I'm a coach now, the head of an academy, and I'm like, shouldn't I just be coaching? Why the hell am I even competing anymore? And then, I got my long-term goal. Why am I still competing, Dan? This doesn't make any sense, does it? And then when I looked at it as the hero's journey, I was like, oh, I'm going to go compete so I can learn something, get new knowledge, have this adventure, and bring it back to the academy, bring it back to my tribe. And when I thought of doing that, it removed a lot of anxiety, because then the whole experience was, number one, it had a larger purpose, a purpose bigger than me. So, and then the winning or the losing wasn't as important as getting the new knowledge. So it just reframed the whole experience and made it much more approachable, and I was more motivated to do it. And I was less tied in, and I wasn't afraid of losing, you know?
And again, just to hammer the point home, maybe unnecessarily, but it worked for you. Like this happened. Like it's not hypothetical.
Yeah.
Like
stuff that I've used and worked for me.
Like you actually did it, and you thought of the hero's journey, and you felt less anxiety. Like
yes.
And which goes for each of these points.
And
you did it, and it actually has worked for you. It's not like what I think might work.
Yeah. And I brought back the Natasha Kinski Jaguar Technique from the hero's journey. That was one of the things I brought back. So that was 4 techniques, Dan. I think we should wrap it up, because I think we've gone our limit. And they got 4 good things. More importantly,
I'm not sure the listeners deserve more than 4 good things.
It's great. That's perfect. And we can have another episode. I have a lot more, but I think some of the key points are, what you're really afraid of unconsciously is losing status. And you really don't have to be afraid of that, because you really can't lose any significant status. Everyone should compete if they can. If you're terrified of competing, you have way more upside if you can get your head around it. Don't compete just once. Try to get out there and compete a bunch of times, and then that takes the pressure off. That's another technique in itself. The first technique you brought up was just powering yourself through it. The act of doing something, lowers your anxiety to doing it. Then we talked about the Hormone MacDonald technique, the Hollywood producer technique, the Jaguar technique, and the hero's journey. Awesome. So everybody, if you found value in this, please subscribe to this YouTube channel. Please subscribe to the podcast if you're listening to it. Tell your friends about it. Share it. And we'll talk to you next week. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.